What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bitchuation Room Podcast, the show, the main show, the entree of the week. This is the full Bitchuation Room. I'm joined by two other bitchy mofos. Okay, I don't know. Do people say mofos anymore? I don't think they do. I feel like Gen X was really into mofo. Thank you so much for being here and for pressing play and deciding you don't want to be alone, ever. You're just going to be with me and my two guests. Comedian and actor Anthony Atamanuik is going to be here back on the show. It's been way too long. And podcast host Max of UNF the Republic is here. UNF the Republic does deep dives, gives you context for news that we're seeing play out every single day. And I deeply appreciate him. And so I hope you all familiarize yourself with UNF the Republic. But for now, it's our time. In fact, it's my time. And I'm going to take this moment to give a little birthday shout out to my baby daddy, my husband, Matt Lieb, who I think baby daddy and husband are actually mutually exclusive because it means like, oh, you married him, you know, but it's his birthday, May 2nd. He's like 27 or whatever. And I'm wearing his shirt. If you're listening, it is a shirt that says "How Come" on it. And it is, you know, every comic has to sell merch at the end. Basically, you have one big closer joke and then you just sell merch based on the closer joke. And the joke is people who say "how come" instead of "why" are very particular people that have, as he says, different sets of problems than you and I do. And wouldn't it be funny if someone were, like leaning over their dead relative or wife and we're like, "How come" instead of "why." So that's this man right here. You can get your "How Come" t-shirt. I don't know, ping Matt about getting a "How Come" t-shirt or come see us live when we do more live stand-up, which we are going to be doing throughout the year. We're thinking about some interesting sites, some interesting times. But anyway, thanks so much for being here. If you are listening as a podcast, give this podcast 5 stars on all the things. If you're watching as a stream, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you become a Twitch member over on Twitch. And remember that this is, again, only one portion of a show that is honestly 3 prongs. There's a Wednesday bonus show. There's a Friday bonus show. And you get access to all of those for free to listen back to or watch back. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. That's how you go to support this ad-free, or you will get ad-free content once you become a patron. You get a special little RSS feed. It's rainbow colored. It's very cute. If you are a patron at $10 or more, you get a little shout out from yours truly. It's all the things. It's good stuff. And this Fridays are free shows actually for anyone. I'm going to have my mentor, Max Elbaum, who lived through the Vietnam War era, not just lived through it, but was a radical, was a revolutionary organizer during the anti-Vietnam War era. And so I am very excited to talk to him once again on this show. He's always sort of this like light in the darkness and this kind of weather vane. Is he a weather vane? Nostradamus of the left? I'm not really sure, but he's wonderful. So don't miss that on Friday. And right now, let's get into it, guys. Put your goddamn bitch caps on, motherfuckers. This is What Are You Bitching About? So it's been weeks now that I have been obviously bitching about the ongoing repression of student anti-genocide, pro-Palestine protesters. On our bonus episode, if you missed it, we did an hour-long look at what was happening at Columbia University, a lot of the propaganda surrounding it, and then the mob that attacked UCLA demonstrators last night. And by last night, I mean 3 a.m. UCLA was also violently disrupted and broken up by police, I believe by highway patrol, which is even greater. Like, that's just like the scum of the scum of the scum. I mean, it's not quite the sheriff's department in LA, but it's very scummy. And I'm not sure if this is verified, but I think that the highway patrol had access to more lethal weapons or different weapons like tear gas that apparently the LAPD was not allowed to use. All that to say, kids were hit in the head with rubber bullets. They were hit in the face with flashbang grenades and things like this. And again, this is the day after a mob tried to destroy the peaceful encampment. But anyway, we've all been waiting on bated breath to see, whether Biden's going to say anything, right? These campus protests have been a site where Republicans have gone and sort of grandstood about, we have to support Israel and we have to support freedom of not freedom of speech. Shit, that was last week's talking point. That was last year's. Basically decrying everything that's going on there. So Biden had a moment. He had a moment today, and he spoke to what was happening on college campuses and the fact that divestment campaigns and the cries to stop funding Israel's genocide on the people of Palestine and the people of Gaza are spreading like wildfire. And here is what he had to say. Let's take a look. I got to get full remarks. Here we are.
On our college campuses here. We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. Excuse me. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent.
Really? We're not? We're okay. Well, he said we're not. Well, yeah, I mean, I know they're like cops violently broke up the encampments and punched 19-year-olds and threw them downstairs, but he said we're not. We're not authoritarian. So I guess what that was all authoritarian. That was democratic what happened last night and 2 nights ago.
The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society, and order must prevail. Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation.
What were those? Wait, hang on, time out. What were those moments? What were the moments like this? Let's just go over them. What were they? Were maybe about I don't know, Black people having equal rights. Maybe about the Black Americans being able to be educated alongside white students. The right to vote. Was that a moment? Were they called lawless at the time? Pretty sure they were. What about when the U.S. was engaged in decades-long war in Vietnam and killing millions of Vietnamese? And when we saw, our children, people saw their children come home in body bags day after day after day after day. Was that a moment? What? Let's talk about the moments. Hey, why rush through the speech? Talk about the moments. What side of history are chumps like you on in that moment in history when we've been through this before? And what side of history were the students on? Time and again, rarely, like, there was never a student movement that was like, bless Harvey Weinstein. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, even before the Me Too movement, like the right to rape, like that wasn't a thing. Why? Because students generally are on the right side of history when there's a student movement that pops off, right? There was like student groups don't form up around like protecting predators, or like the right to kill animals or, or some shit. Like, it doesn't happen. They're usually doing something for human rights. Anyway.
In moments like this, there are always those who rush in to score political points. But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear.
So he's basically talking to Mike Johnson, Lauren Boebert, James Comer, and everyone else who's taken it upon themselves to visit these campus protests and use it as a moment to hit Biden. He's like, no, it's not a moment for politics. It's a moment to...
Here, peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education. Look, it's basically a matter.
So in other words, don't use this is not to score political points. I'm here to tell you that this is above politics. Why? Because I 100% agree with those Republicans who have been chiding these students, because I agree that they are lawless. I agree that they have somehow broken the law, and that I am more concerned with like a shitty desk at Columbia's Hamilton Hall being pushed up against a door than I am about the murder of 13,000 Palestinian children, than I am about a group of Palestinian children who were playing foosball, who were struck in a targeted strike by the IDF using our American-made missiles.
Of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree.
I mean, this is indistinguishable from Southern segregationists telling MLK to like pipe down. Indistinguishable.
The right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked. Let's be clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students. There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans.
That's fun. There's spared a thought.
It's simply wrong. There's no place for racism in America. It's all wrong. It's un-American. I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America,
which is weird to me because I have none. I am a hollow shell of a person. I was just stuffed with gold in my ears propaganda, and I just echo it. I am an empty suit, and I understand there's people out there who are human and who have hearts. I am not one of them.
We respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes. It needs to be done without violence, without destruction, without hate, and within the law.
In other words, not done at all. Could you not? Like, if your protest is going to be chaotic, we're going to probably arrest you.
Make no mistake. As president, I will always defend free speech. And I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law. That's my responsibility to you, the American people, my obligation to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, have the protests forced you to reconsider any of the policies with regard to the region?
No. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think...
Beautiful, beautiful dismount. He's not quite off yet. His foot's still in the stirrup of this horse. This very just dead, far beaten horse. Mr. President, have the student protests caused you to rethink your policies in regard to notice how she's not triggering him, region? Region is very stand-in for just talking about Gaza, talking about Israel. No, region. No. They have not. First of all, I call bullshit on that. I think he's scared. I do think he's scared, and I think they are having an impact. But the callousness with which he can just say no. Oh boy. This is the same guy that is going to be calling on everybody to get out the vote. Get out the vote. Come on, young people. I banned TikTok and allowed a rubber bullet to go into your skull. Young people.
I think the National Guard should intervene.
No.
Do you think the National Guard should intervene? No, as he walks away. You gotta love a Biden. Like, I know the right loves to hate on Biden's little dismounts like this, where he like turns his back and then like says it, answers it anyway. Like, just go. Just leave. You said the thing. Go away. At least he didn't come back to the podium like he did when he was trying to defend his memory. This is where we are, people. It is terrifying that this is a president who will not budge, even though 57% of his actual voters of Democrats believe that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. Yes, definitionally a genocide. And he has only himself to blame. And yet we are the ones who are going to lose if he does in November. He's fucking us. He's fucking democracy as he claims to want to save it in the same breath that he excuses the brutalizing of people exercising their democratic right to protest. And they are being peaceful. Look at all of the places where cops have not been called in. Oh, you haven't heard shit about them. Why? Because there's no violence. Because there's no violence. No one's heard talking about Irvine. Because there's no violence. Because the mayor has not decided to call the cops in on them yet. It's a radicalizing moment. I've talked about it a lot, and I'm tired of my own voice. So let us bring in, for the rest of the show, to bitch about maybe a different aspect. He's a comedian, an actor. You've seen him on The President's Show with one of the best impressions of Donald Trump and all of just his id. And he's going to be bringing back his show Coffee with Tony on Twitch on June 1st. Don't miss that. I think it's midday. Welcome, Tony Atamanuik.
Hello. I was dabbing at my glasses just as we came in here. I wanted to just say, yes, I'll talk about some other stuff, but that one in particular, that presser is, I think, such a manifestation of this sort of all the depravity that and I will say, this radicalized me. The last 7 months, I've always thought of myself as radical light. I always wanted to sort of go like, well, if the levers of things move, eventually stuff starts to change. There's hope on the horizon.
Right.
I mean, it is true. There's a larger leftist contingent in Congress than there's ever been. Like, there are not to sound like I'm, on Morning Joe here. There are there are positives, and I do like to.
Please don't Morning Joe me, but
take that in.
Tell me about being radicalized.
What do you say?
I said, tell me about how you're being radicalized.
Well, I think that I think for me, to look at this wholesale rejection of reality, and also to stop access to reality. See, to me, it's a multi-pronged effect. You have the restriction of the press, right? You have the restriction of the press's coverage, and for any legitimate organizations that wanted to go in there and try to cover Gaza. This is a long-standing story that has continued pretty much post-Vietnam of not allowing coverage of wars.
Yep.
You also have...
But the difference is now, Tony, and we know this, sorry to interject.
Yeah.
The difference between, the sort of dark years of 2003 when we couldn't physically see the million Iraqis who were being killed thanks to our policies there. We had some breakthroughs on that. Abu Ghraib was like, oh, whoa. Yeah. Now we have social media. I mean, now we're literally seeing it. So the Vietnam effect is back.
I agree, but here's my problem with social media. Is that you have a incredibly effective disinformation tool. So although it is true that you can see things and it's not like I'm not saying I don't believe the things that are shown, but there's no standards to that broadcast.
Sure.
There's no ability. So anyone can cherry pick anything and make an argument for or against it. and it becomes this malaise, this soup of confusion, where there is no real like moment where someone goes, no, this is reported, this was researched, this was the editorial group that looked at this and said, yes, this is worth reporting out. You've lost that. And now what happens is that since Twitter was a resource for news producers for years, and now it's essentially Parler Light. And so now, but like anything, once something's baked in, they don't back off of it. So our news coverage is still essentially baited by this disinformation online, and the disinformation online is now curated. It's not as if all this stuff is random. You have our espionage agencies, you have other countries' espionage agencies. They all have cyber wings. They're all working to push information forward. So it's just a new form of lobbying that's happening in a massive broadcast way that actually adds to, in my view, the confusion. I mean, I know you already went over this, but like UCLA, a lot of the fact that in it's 72 hours or 48 hours, and there is still this report that the protesters got violent when it was provocateurs, it was Zionist provocateurs who were going there, who got violent, who fired fireworks. I don't think people understand that firing a firework at people is not something, it's not like a sparkler. It is a charged weapon with gunpowder in it.
Yep.
And that has, so to me, the fact that it works its way all the way up the chain to all mainstream coverage, to all online mainstream coverage, and then all the way up to the White House, where the president is speaking. I mean, I think we both know, and most of viewers know, most of what a president knows is through briefs and through advisors. They're not even really paying attention to what's happening. So he's being fed. So I'm not taking any responsibility off of him, but there's a whole mechanism that is leading up to this disinformation, and it cuts both ways and it works both ways.
Yeah.
On Instagram, which is where I want to really bitch, is people who are fellow performers or comedians who are trying to do the work of propaganda, and then also with one hand say, listen, these people are animals and we need to wipe them out. And what they did on October 7th, and just to get this out of the way, because I know this is, fair or not, maybe other people don't listen, what happened on October 7th was clearly awful. I would hate to be a hostage. I would hate, all that shit is terrible. I think the idea that we have to debate whether that's bad or not is crazy.
No, it's okay.
Horrible.
You're not on Piers Morgan. It's fine.
Okay. So it's horrible there, right?
Yeah.
That circumstance.
Of course.
But this idea that what it ungoverns is the same old bigoted rhetoric, comparing people to animals, assigning the responsibility of a group that, by the way, there were members of the Proto-Likud party that drafted the Muslim Brotherhood. The United States did the same thing, and they did it both in destabilizing Egypt and in Afghanistan. And then they formed a challenge to the Fatah party. That was the fomentation of Hamas. This is a creation of the desire for Israel to control the situation and do what it is stated to want to do since 1921, since an article written called Political Zionism by Albert Clay, published in 1921 in The Atlantic, that says there's the three wings: economic Zionism, religious Zionism, and political Zionism. In this article, he talks about their desire to cast Palestinians as nomads, as people who are Bedouins, even though there are very few Bedouins, if any, in that region at the time. So this is not 5 years old, 6 months old. This is 100 years of propaganda, 100 years of recasting people because of a marginal group of people who, by the way, were marginal within Judaism. They were marginal within Judaism. And I am so sick and tired of the comparison and conflation of the idea that I have to somehow be a Zionist in any way, and that is a refutation of my Judaism if I'm not. It's offensive to me, and it's offensive to cast Jews who are protesting in Columbia and UCLA as somehow less Jewish. This is a problem that's existed for a long time outside of any of this paradigm about who's got it and who doesn't. But I find it so foul and so inhumane. There's a particular fella, this Daniel Ryan Spalding, who I find so repugnant. I find him repugnant as a person. His glee in the violence. This is the thing I don't get, and it really exposes something about comedy, that there are a good segment of comedians who are just stone cold psychopaths.
Yep.
And if you're in comedy, you know it. And these folks are just looking to funnel their hatred in a way that allows them to both get their joke out, but also it's such hack stuff. You were talking about ageism beforehand, and it's like, I'm pushing 50. I turned 50 in June. There is nothing I fear deeper than being out of touch and going, these goddamn kids. There is nothing I would lose my mind if that happened. And you see people who do it and they lose their mind. And the idea of being like, oh, a purple hair girl is like, what are you, my fucking grandmother? Sorry, can I swear here?
You can.
Okay. What? I mean, you're
talking about this guy. Sorry.
Yes.
He calls himself a comedian, Daniel Ryan Spalding. He was also gay, right?
Yes.
And he uses a lot of sort of these pink washing tropes. I'm assuming I don't subject myself to these videos, but about like how like, you know, Hamas would kill you because you're gay, and like, you know, probably celebrates the idea of draping a pride flag over a, you know, destroyed like, you know, civilian building, apartment building.
Yeah.
Which is, if you think weaponizing Judaism is offensive, I am imagining all of the gay people who are so fucking livid at how offensive it is to use gay rights as some sort of, you know, piece of this genocide.
Well, it's ignorance. It's ignorance. It's conflation by ignorance. And it's this idea that somehow you've made some sort of rhetorical trap for someone to step in.
Totally.
When in no way have you, because the idea that, because the argument ultimately becomes, because this small segment of folks who are committing political violence in order to try to achieve their means, right, which is the definition of terrorism. You're using violence to achieve political means. This nominal group requested to be funded by Netanyahu just weeks before the attack. I mean, this is the craziest part of it, that somehow, because they would, you know, hate you because you're gay or stone you to death or do whatever, that somehow that reflects on not only the whole population, but also justifies the inhumanity and violence you want to rain down on people who, my other favorite statement here, and he does this one too, which is, well, they voted for Hamas. Yeah. Which to me is like saying
13,000 children.
Yeah, those children did. And let's just even remove the idea. Like, guess what? Everyone votes for Kim Jong-un. Everybody in North Korea does. So does that mean that they're all, you know, by the way, there's a cult called Zionism that runs Israel that has indoctrinated. Listen, I feel bad actually for everyone who has come up in cult-like thinking that has convinced you that there's only one path, and that path is violence. And I know this is not funny, but it's the last thing I wanted to say is that the most unfortunate thing to me is we're not living in the echo of Trump. We're not living in the echo of you know, Obama. We're living the echo of the entirety of the American age, of the expansion of the West. And I, at the same time, will say, listen, I don't think Israel's going anywhere. Same way I don't think we're going to be returning Texas to Mexico anytime soon. I don't think that there will be some rewinding of history. I do think, though, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's going to happen. But what I do think could happen is that instead of us allowing the Bush era doctrine of dehumanization of Muslims that then led to the news media freeze that has allowed us to reach this point of viewing all protesters as just agitators, that Biden makes this conflation that goes from violent acts suddenly to just presence, right? Yeah. Whereas Black organizations occupied school buildings in the 60s. Suffrage groups occupied buildings in the 20s and 10s. This is not new. None of what's happening is new. None of it is new. And yet we're painting it as if it's some new, or the fringe behavior of satellite people. Anyone who's been in a protest movement knows you have all kinds of fucking kooks who jump into the march.
Totally.
I'm not responsible for that person. And
not to say nothing of the fact that a lot of provocateurs the other day a protest was shut down because Zionist protesters just said kill the Jews and they arrested everybody and it's like, wait a minute, it's like, doesn't matter, the kill the Jews line has come out.
Sorry,
Anthony,
I went so long. Yes,
you have, and you seem agitated, which is why, and this is me trying to get our only sponsor in here before I bring Max in. Sunset Lake CBD, Anthony. Don't you laugh.
No, it sounds great.
It is a wonderful company in Vermont, vertically integrated. They grow all of their own cannabis plants that they then turn into craft CBD. Oh. They've got tinctures. They've got gummies. Wow. It'll help you sleep. It'll help you chill. They've got coffee with CBD in it because sometimes, you don't want to get too buzzed. I love Sunset Lake. Yeah, I love they have focus gummies that have ashwagandha and cordyceps, like the mushrooms from Last of Us. I have been using Sunset Lake for like over a year now to sleep because I have anxiety because of everything.
The world, yeah.
The world. I also love their lotions. So guys, sunsetlakecbd.com. Coupon code FRANTIFA, FRANTIFA, 20% off your order. God damn it. I had to get it in. I had to get it. Yes. And I hope and they're so great. And so everybody go there.
They sound great. I would love to take some too. I love CBD, and this is the only company I'm ever going to buy from now forever.
And now let me bring in, we have to keep it tight, but this is going to be one of those shows. Every once in a while we have one of those shows. It's going to be long. It's going to be good. He is the host of the Unfuck the Republic or Unfucking the Republic podcast. Please welcome Max.
What's good?
Hey.
Hey, Franny. Hey, Anthony. Good to meet you.
Hi, Max. Nice to meet you.
I told my co-host that you were on, and she literally lost her mind. So at some point, I just need you to say, hey, what's up, 99?
Hey, what's up, 99?
I'm so good for a while. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
I love, no, you're welcome. Anthony, I think it's really funny that you obviously have nothing in common with Donald Trump, but the way you were able to breathlessly speak for nearly 10 minutes.
I'm sorry, yeah.
And I was really trying. I was like, where do I? Right there. No. It was
this been pent up for a long time.
I know, but this is good. Like we need these outlets. And Max, this is your time to shine because you also, I know, have something to bitch about. You cover a lot of different stories, not just obviously what's going on in Gaza, but tell us, what are you bitching about this Tuesday?
I'm a fan, and I've been waiting for that question for so very long. And so my mind was racing, and I was thinking, do I bitch about the ongoing genocide in Gaza, or the dystopian crackdown of our overly militarized domestic law enforcement agencies on students and free speech, or the humanitarian crisis in Sudan? We could bitch about that, or the climate refugees literally all over the world because we just won't make any meaningful, improvements towards the IPCC targets. I could talk about the 3 ballot choices that go from bad to worse to catastrophic, and the order of which is choose your own adventure. But honestly, I as evidenced by the fact that I'm not sitting here with a fresh plate of sushi, Hustler magazine circa 1982 from the archive, and a bowl of Skittles, it's obvious that your people did not get my rider. And so I was going to bitch about that because I feel a little slighted because I know Anthony probably got everything that he asked for because he's super famous.
I got a quarter bottle of Fiji water.
See?
And a USB converter.
That's right. You take care of that. You take care of it.
I'm bitching about 702. I'm bitching about section 702. Which is basically the expanded section under FISA.
Yes, and Sam Cedar was bitching about this a couple weeks ago.
It ties in very much to I think what we're talking about a little bit here today with the student protests, because the expansion of this particular section and just the reauthorization of FISA alone has very, very dystopian tentacles to it, which basically now allows the entire internet to be surveilled through the equivalent of warrantless wiretaps. There is not a place, there is no Wi-Fi, there is no secure place in America anymore where your information cannot be seized by the federal government without a warrant into what are already secret courts in FISA. The problem, beyond just the fact that that's clearly Orwellian, and I don't use that hyperbolically as a lot of people do, is that there are other pieces of the National Defense Authorization Act, FISA, and other tributary laws that now allow the government to essentially disappear protesters and label them as terrorist actors under this new expanded ruling. We have evidence of that from the past, which basically came up during the Iraq War and then was codified into law by the Obama administration. And one of the biggest criticisms at that time, of course, was that Obama was essentially handing a gift to Trump unwittingly that they would be able to do this. And now the government has this ability to essentially disappear anybody who is found guilty of dissent. And so I'm bitching about 702 and the fact that I have no Skittles.
Wow.
One of those things is righteous. Yeah, no, it is incredibly scary, the way that, and I think like Walter Schaub, who was part of the Office of Government Ethics, which is very funny because I didn't know there was a Office of Government Ethics until Trump, and he resigned under him. But, he was always remarking about how, like, despite what Democrats say when it comes to fear of fascism, protecting democracy, that they continue to develop and expand the different apparatuses that were set up under these, again, back to what Anthony was saying, in the wake of 9/11, as the DHS was created, as these warrantless wiretaps began, just like blanket spying, and Schaub was also executive power is right along with that. No party has made any efforts to honestly and earnestly dismantle either the surveillance state, the amount of executive power that's being concentrated, what's happening on the border, which I know you are working on a series about. But it's like, it's the same thing with Palestine, right? You see there's a grand consensus between both parties. Like, when it comes to militarism, when it comes to the right to disappear you and take away your civil liberties, we kind of are both with it.
It's interesting to look at the distribution of votes on both sides of the aisle as it got to, because the House is the House is pure chaos and as unideological, I think, as anybody has ever been. But when it gets to the Senate, which is supposed to be this great cooling mechanism for democracy, the distribution of votes is really interesting because it's pretty split. Now, 60 senators voted for it, which was enough for it to clear the hurdle to get to the desk. But of those who voted for it, it was kind of evenly distributed. And what you saw was the MAGA wing actually standing forward for theoretically civil rights, but it's only because it was at Trump's behest, because he said FISA is dangerous. And you have Democrats who are supposed to be the
don't put it into my hands.
Right. And, so you've got like Senator Ron Wyden, who's always right there on the front lines, pretty much doing all the right thing when it comes to speech and civil liberties, and saying, what are we doing? Like, as Democrats, we at a minimum, we have to protect people's ability to protest and express dissent. And it's just not happening. And it just further kind of codifies this weird time that we're in, that it's hard to pick who's on what side of any particular issue. And nothing is bringing that to the fore more than the Israel-Palestine issue that has fractured us even deeper along some really interesting lines. I mean, Anthony's hitting on it before, that it's like there's so many, this is 100-year history, this one particular issue, of which we only have a sliver of influence. But this current sliver of influence that we have is so impactful, so outsized to any corollary that we have in history. The only place left for these students to possibly demonstrate and express their dissatisfaction of it in the narrowest of ways would be through these campus protests. And nobody can figure out who's on what side. I mean, I'm in New York, so I see it directly every single day that people are struggling with this rather simple issue.
Yeah, very simple.
Well, but the muddling of it has to do with the joining and linking of the concept of Zionism and Judaism, and that has
And let's
been
get to that.
long-term mission.
Well,
that
let's
is
get to that
finally
because
partially achieved.
let's get to it because I think it is an interesting discussion. We may not have time to get into too much more than these stories, but I do want to talk about all the anti-Semitism acts and the actions to stop anti-Semitism or alleged anti-Semitism, and then Trump's immunity. And we may only have time for that. I'm warning you.
He has HIV.
Our final, exactly. I know.
Finally,
It's this is the week where. So this is the week where Congress finally acted on Gaza by passing a bill to stop anti-Semitism called the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. This passed the House. It has not yet passed the Senate, just passed yesterday. And it would require the Department of Education to use the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism when determining if an act of discrimination against students violates federal statutes. So again, it is redefining discrimination to include this one particular definition of anti-Semitism. Now, a number of Democrats didn't vote for it. Pramila Jayapal was one who said this definition of anti-Semitism is very broad. There were other Jewish Congress people who also didn't vote for it, saying the same thing. This feels like this would restrict freedom of speech. At the same time, the freedom of speech is being restricted on college campuses across this country. So very interesting, but at least these 70 Congress people, including some Republicans that I'll get to, voted against it. And also we'll talk about the other two anti-Semitism acts that are coming down the pike. But okay, so why is this controversial is because the definition of anti-Semitism, according to the Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which sounds like a great alliance, like, yes, let's remember the Holocaust. This should be an easy thing. However, the kinds of definitions that they have in there show that they clearly conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, as per Anthony's remarks earlier. One of them is, this is anti-Semitic according to them, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination. Okay, that's fine. Example, by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So that I think is problematic because the state of Israel, by demographically excluding and deliberately policing and occupying Palestinian land and preventing them from becoming full citizens of Israel and denying them a country of their own, is pretty fucking racist. Like, it's pretty racist to say, hey, if you're Muslim, you drive on this road, and if you're Jewish, you drive on that road. It is an apartheid system based on religion and ethnicity, and calling that racist, as Ta-Nehisi Coates recently did, in Democracy Now!, he goes, I went to the West Bank. As a Black American, I have no problem identifying exactly what this is. It's a two-tiered system of living. So that would be deemed as anti-Semitic if you point out that Israel is racist. Another thing, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Now, here's what's funny to me about this. If you even need to say this, the question would be like, wait, why would anyone draw that comparison? Like, why would anyone compare Israel to the action of the Nazis?
I don't know, but write it down.
Exactly. But you can't say it. Don't even think it. Well, now I'm thinking about it. Maybe I should Google this. Maybe I should look into it a little bit more. So that's considered anti-Semitic, obviously. And we've seen, like, I am not someone who, and again, back to the point of every movement is going to have a banner you don't like or a sign you disagree with. And for me, that sign was always the Jewish, the Israeli flag with a swastika in the middle instead of the Star of David. I was like, that feels like we don't need to do that. It feels like a bridge too far, even though some of the behavior is incredibly, ethno-nationalist, yes. Right? And it is calling, these are Israeli officials openly call Palestinians, subhuman and animals, and this is what they deserve, and violence is the only language they understand. It is not, again, it is a different contour than the Holocaust, but one could see that their comparison is there. That was a Holocaust. This is absolutely a genocide. So erasure is the point. There's no, hey, maybe there'll be an after this. No. Erasure in the minds of many Israelis, especially in the government, that's the point. So, and then finally, I don't mean to make this so long, but holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel, that I might agree with. I think that actually is anti-Semitic. Like,
it's pretty crazy.
That is.
I don't want no part of that shit. Don't put that in the thing.
Exactly.
Why? You gotta be kidding me.
But what's crazy about that is, like, this is openly admitting. So in the same breath, this alliance conflates Israel and Judaism. And right, and says, if you criticize Israel,
that's the design.
You're effectively saying that Jews don't have self-determination. But also, it's anti-Semitic to blame Jews for the actions of Israel, which I would agree is anti-Semitic. But then you just conflated them by saying, like, so you see what I'm saying? You can't have it both ways. And so that's why a lot of progressives voted against it. Anyway, I want to stop down and get your thoughts, both of you.
It's purposeful confusion. This is all purposeful confusion. To me, I see this as another layer, and there's this layer of rhetorical subterfuge going on. There's creating layers upon. It's like making a croissant or a really good pie. You're putting all this cold butter between each layer of the dough, right? Because you want to flake it up, and so we're all getting flaked and puffed up. Right? Like puff pastry. We're getting puff political pastry happening where not only does
it's not as delicious either.
It's not, there's no volume there's no actual volume to it. It's completely flaky when you look into it. And at the end of the day, the design is a political design. And this is what I don't understand. It is a political design. This is a government that has policies. Those policies might be ethnocentric. Whatever, you can argue there's tons of ethnocentric policies amongst a variety of governments. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with tying the United States. This has been going on since forever, but I would say in active measure since the first Gulf War. There has been this desire to draw the United States. I would recommend everyone watch The Pope of Greenwich Village. Eric Roberts is Israel in The Pope of Greenwich Village.
Okay.
It is a dysfunctional figure.
It's a deep cut. I like
who
that.
keeps drawing you into their dysfunction, and there is no bottom to it. And so, and the second part, just to say, is all this stuff, this speech, this is political calculation that has been brought on partially by Nikki Haley and this fiction that some political strategists have created about Florida. They believe they can abandon the left and that they can win with this center sliver that Nikki Haley disaffected votes. It's the same play they've been doing for 40 years.
Democrats.
That never works.
Yeah.
And they want to try to get Florida back for some goddamn reason. And I think
counterpoint, Anthony, 2016, it did work, except she didn't win, but she did win the popular vote. So that's what matters.
Yeah, no.
It's definitely a cynical play. There's no question about it, because the rhetoric in the legislation is really dangerous because it actually has, there will be net results and effects if this is codified into law. The purpose of it is I find it very performative, is if they're putting out a litmus test to see basically who's going to be able to send out the mailer saying they voted for what in a particular district.
Yes.
So it does feel very strategic, cynically, politically strategic. And the thing I don't get, this is the thing I don't get about, is one of the things I don't get about establishment Democrats. It's, to me, the same behavior as the anti-trans movement. Because it's coming from the same place. There's no real belief system there. And I think if you were to press people to it, first of all, they're so ill-informed and so ahistorical about all of this. But so you can't even press them on the details of it, because it just turns into a bumper sticker. And it's basically saying, we're going to float this. If you voted for it, use it in your mailer. If you voted against it, use it in your mailer. And we're going to try to, they're not even thinking about the consequences of it. They're just thinking about the positioning of it. And I think it's almost like we've inflated the danger in this moment because it's an election year.
Yeah.
But they failed with the anti-trans stuff on the Republican side. The Democrats are kind of doing the same thing. They don't get that this shit's not resonating. Like,
Yeah.
it's really not moving the needle on votes. If anything, it's doing them a disservice because people are like, that's too overtly hateful.
Well, and it's also trying to. It's a weird moment. It's a weird moment for, I think, Jewish Americans who do identify as openly Zionist, right? Because you have, if you are voting purely on Israel policy, you would vote Trump, because who's going to be more bloodthirsty than Trump? Nobody, right? I mean, now this is all hypothetical because Biden's pretty fucking bloodthirsty.
Mm-hmm.
But you have Trump out there going, if you're Jewish and you vote for Biden, you hate yourself and you hate Israel, right? And he's openly baiting Jewish Americans who overwhelmingly vote Democrat. And to me, Max, I think that these lawmakers don't want the Israeli lobby on their ass. We've seen the money that's coming after the squad. It continues to come after them, even though Summer Lee did win her primary election, which was really important. But they don't want that smoke. They don't want the smoke. I mean, Anthony, it's like staying quiet in Hollywood, but imagine that instead you have like millions of dollars coming at you.
Well, yeah, and also, it's not lost on me that so many of these Instagram sort of IDF defenders also seem to have book tours and books coming out at the same time. It's just a bizarre confluence of events that everyone has a fucking book coming out at the same time that they're posting 15 times a day. I do want to say about Trump, and this is not a defense of Trump in any way, but I've said this a few times, and I really do believe it. Although I do believe that he passively would be as terrible, if not worse, than Biden when it comes to Israel in terms of policy or looking the other way or whatever. Trump is notoriously afraid of war. He's afraid of missiles. He is afraid. If you think about it, in the 4 years, he bombed an airport runway that was abandoned.
Yeah.
And I think he did one other thing.
He took out Qasem Soleimani. That was pretty big strike.
I think did he take him out, or did someone go, hey, we're going to do this after the fact? That would be my guess.
We're letting you know. Israel's letting you know.
And I think that this is not like, oh, he'd be great, but I'm saying I do think that he's so afraid. A narcissist as deep as him is terrified of nuclear war, terrified of any of that stuff happening. And I just think that, honestly, he would probably be bad in other ways in terms of creating strategic problems with other supposed defense paradigms that we want to reinforce. But this all has to do also with all these old established interconnected relationships that are falling apart, and that people, this is the last thing I'll say, this is the most we've ever seen ourselves. We are broadcasting in ways we've never been able to do, even 10 years ago. Humanity has to reflect on the fact that a lot of things that occurred in the past that we cite as, well, but this happened, and so, I mean, what Israel's doing is better than what that did or whatever. We didn't witness these horrors at that massive scale. You read it in a paper or you saw it in a newsreel, and at some point you heard it from a guy on a horse. This is the most we've ever seen everything, and we're not accounting for the psychological impact of that and the immediacy of people responding and saying, no, this is unconscionable. That's why it's happening at light speed.
No, but I agree with that 100%, but I also want to just push back and say that like military experts, historians, everyone who's assessed the damage, I mean, how many nuclear bombs has the destruction in Gaza been the equivalent of? It's something like, like 2
I
or
think
3.
It's 3 Nagasaki's.
It's like exactly. And so like the scale is quite I think that the line is, in the modern era, the scale is unprecedented. And again, yeah. So I mean,
but imagine if you had social media in 2003 the way we have it now.
100%. That's what I was saying before.
Yeah.
But before we leave this issue, because you were talking about, yes, Trump being a narcissist, would he be all for it? I don't know, but I also know he doesn't want an abortion ban, but everyone in the Republican Party is going to push him to enact one should he be reelected. Yeah. Here is what his party is saying. So there is some daylight between Joe Biden and this motherfucker, Senator Tom Cotton. This is what they're saying about student protests.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
Oh, that's his homie, though. He always wanted to get back to Iran. So I'm not sure, Max and Anthony, it's sort of difficult to figure out like what the catchphrase of that was. Like what did he really want to push? What's the new
Oh,
hot?
he's definitely trying to enter little Gazas into the lexicon. There's
There
no
we go.
question about it.
Little Gazas.
But
He sold a Netflix show called Little Gazas. It's like a little bunch of kids and a dog.
Yeah, starring
Sounds
Reese
very
Witherspoon.
cute. Yeah.
Just little Gazas. This penis with ears has never been right about anything and has never gotten anything to stick. So I don't think that it's so bad. You know, people aren't going to pick up on little Gazas, and it just shows how desperate he is to try and frame this issue and catch some, sunlight in this whole thing.
But what's terrifying about little Gazas is he's saying that as a bad thing, right? He's saying these are terrorist enclaves. Never mind the men, women, and children who are literal innocent civilians. Never mind the surgeons, the teachers, the people who have been found zip-tied in mass graves.
Yes.
They're little Gazas, and our police officers are little IDFs. I mean, I had a tweet which was basically like, at Columbia, why not send in the IDF and let's do the satire for realsies? Like, that's like...
Well, if Netanyahu could, he would.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically lectured us last week about how to run our country. And there was a spokesperson who said, I don't know how they must have done something wrong, and that's why they got shot. And the reporter went, but their hands were tied. So that would mean they got shot with their hands tied. And they went, well, you listen to me. And I will say that is a particular strategy that these Israeli IDF spokespeople have that is the most annoying, which is the violent over-talking. That the minute any sort of reason enters the story, it is, no, here is the script, and you must, and I think they're so confused that they're like, well, why aren't you're supposed to be doing this script? I don't get it. I don't get why you're not doing the same script as me.
They're very incensed that you would ask them.
Yeah.
Like, ask them at all to be held accountable for the death of, hospital workers. Before we move on, I mean, there's a lot here. But I did just want to mention that this is one of 3 anti-Semitism bills that have just cropped up in the last couple weeks. Again, this is what we're doing as a country. Never mind, conditioning aid to Israel. One of them, Hakeem Jeffries, is very keen on. He wants the Speaker Johnson to come and bring the Countering Anti-Semitism Act to the floor that would establish a national coordinator to counter anti-Semitism at the White House, who would serve as the president's main advisor on combating anti-Semitism in the U.S. and coordinate federal efforts on that matter. I'm sure none of that will involve policing people who want to stop the occupation or the genocide. And then finally, here is Richie Torres, who... truly takes the cake. Takes the literal money cake when it comes to the Israeli lobby. I think he's visited Israel multiple times since October 7th. He's introducing, because he loves they love this bullshit wordplay, the Columbia Act, the College Oversight and Legal Updates Mandating Bias Investigations and Accountability Act. You really just oh boy. And this is even more chilling. So not only now the DOE has this new definition of anti-Semitism, it would send, quote, third-party anti-Semitism monitors to any college that receives federal funding and revoke that funding for colleges that don't comply. Guess who else wants to revoke college funding if they don't comply with supporting Israel?
Donald Trump.
Lauren Boebert, fucking Mike Johnson, every single fucking Republican. And the liberal, these so-called liberal institutions are walking right into that trap willingly.
One of the things that strikes me is it's amazing. Anthony used the word conflation before, and what the media has done, I'm sure we're not helping it right now, but what the media has done is they have turned this into the central narrative because it's what is on fire today. And if you simply do the math, so we were talking about this on the show the other day, that there are, Axios reported, I think that there are 59 active protests that you would consider encampments. So something has been taken over and kids are taking up residence, not just kids walking out into the square in the middle of the day after lunch and being, with a Palestine flag. Encampments. But there are 4,000 campuses, 2-year and 4-year campuses that offer, degrees in this country. So we're talking about 1.5%. And again, this is not an overwhelming movement. It's an important one. And what the students are doing is vital, but the breathless coverage, and again, the ahistorical coverage and the piss poor coverage the mainstream media is giving it by giving air to the other side of this thing is turning this into something that gives the fodder for the legislation. But and I think it's a rounding error. The student protests are a rounding error. And so sometimes I look at it from the other side of it where, like Chris Hedges has been writing for years about the failure of our liberal institutions and how they become a shell of themselves, whether you're talking about the church, obviously the government itself, higher education. Higher education is so chilled on it just as an institution on its own that it doesn't need any help to shut up even more.
Right.
It has been a failing liberal institution and pillar of democracy in this country for a long time by design. That has been a designed effort starting in the 1970s at the same time that we birthed the Federalist Society, at the same time that we were birthing the Heritage Foundation and all of these different think tanks, asking the question, how can we start to strip away all of the democratic gains that have made since the end of World War II and through the civil rights era? And so these organizations, these institutions, they're not set up to even handle this. And the evidence of that is the flip side of this narrative, which is, why aren't there more protests?
Yep.
That's really the question here is that's how chilled the speech is. Because if you look at it, it's so few and far between. You got a bunch in New York, a handful of in Texas. I mean, the crackdown with abusing the professor at in St. Louis. I mean, this is horrifying stuff. And the mainstream media looks at these images and they're just like, they're basically saying the equivalent of, well, I got what he deserved. Shouldn't have been out there in the first place.
They're looking at that image, which I believe you're referring to a professor who is bloody. He has blood on his forehead and he's being pinned on the ground by cops. And they're like, we
broken hand, broken ribs, sent to
into the
pavement.
The pavement.
Yeah.
We got to interview that cop. Who
of
is
course.
he?
Well, it's laziness. I mean, listen, part of me goes, it's a conspiracy. Part of me goes, or not conspiracy, but like that. It's laziness. It's just anyone who's been in a mainstream newsroom, who's been on one of those shows knows, nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about.
Because they don't want that
they
smoke.
Don't care.
They're too afraid.
They don't want it. And this is and so we have, like you were saying, Max, these institutional failures, this liberal shrinkage that's occurred. And it is throughout our systems, and it's because of it's the breaking of the barrier between newsrooms and entertainment divisions. It's the removal of the autonomy of universities and colleges to operate outside of threat of funding reduction, or having to seek funding from weapons manufacturers and various other industries that are going to then become points of protest by these organizations. And you're absolutely right. This thing is being cut off at the stem. I mean, one leaf has grown from this root, and they are acting as if it's Chicago 1968 in riot.
It might be pretty
crazy.
soon. Give us a few months.
I know. I mean,
Chicago's going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy, and I think it's most unfortunate because there's a lot of nobility in what these young folks are doing. And it's being cast in the most cynical way. And what upsets me so deeply is that people who claim to want to talk about their own civil right to exist, or their nation's right to exist, or all that sort of philosophy that's put forward, is actually really just this sort of jackbooted, violent inclination towards silencing people and casting them, primarily when they're brown or Muslim, as some villainous subhuman group. And I just think that we're really treading into some dangerous water. I just don't think the 20s are going to be that great. I said it in 2020. So far, I've been right.
when was my like when was my life? I'm trying to think of like when shit was great for me.
90s, man.
Like make Francesca great again. I guess
90s
so.
were a party. Are you
I
kidding
guess
me?
so.
I had a really good time. I had a great
ripping
night.
rails,
Cool.
fucking hanging
I wasn't
out,
ripping
going to the
rails.
club.
I wasn't doing that, but I was drinking Southern Comfort and smoking a lot of weed. So there was that.
Yeah.
We do have to move on. We are going to talk about one other thing before we wrap. And I want to sort of also lead into a conversation with you, Max, about Project 2025. But Anthony, since you're on, we have to do some Trump's news. And this
Okay.
is the week
I
that
don't even follow him anymore. Yeah, what happened?
Who? This is the week we're learning just how far the Supreme Court is willing to go, or just how chicken shit they are when it comes to actually holding Donald Trump accountable. Because they've lifted up this court case, which, from a lower court that deemed that the president is not above the law.
Right.
There is no such thing as presidential immunity. Donald Trump and his lawyers are claiming that he is immune from prosecution from Jack Smith and the special prosecutor when it comes to what happened on January 6th because he was president.
Right.
So he is immune. And we heard from the Supreme Court where they stand on this. And like, would they go that far? Surely even they understand no president is above the law, especially when that law could be things like killing your political opponent, which in fact was argued by Trump's attorney, John Sayer, who said that, yeah, Trump could assassinate an opponent or stage a coup using the military, and he would still be immune from prosecution.
Yeah.
The DC lower court said absolutely not, but SCOTUS has said maybe. And here's a Slate article from Dahlia Lithwick and Mark Joseph Stern that sort of does a little analysis. I want to read you without subjecting you to the arguments. But they write, after so much speculation that these reasonable, rational jurists would surely dispose of this ridiculous case quickly and easily, Thursday delivered a morass of bad faith hand-wringing on the right about the apparent unbearable possibility that a president might no longer be allowed to wield his powers of office in pursuit of illegal ends. Just as bad, we heard a constant minimization of Jan 6 for the second week in a row, as if the insurrection were ancient history and the history that has since been dramatically overblown, presumably for Democrats' partisan aims. Of course, dipshit number one here is Samuel Alito, who made this incredible argument. He best captured the spirits of the arguments when he asked gravely, what is required for the functioning of a stable democratic society? Good start, they write. Then answered his own question, total immunity for criminal presidents. Indeed, anything but immunity, he suggested, encourage presidents to commit more crimes to stay in office. Quote, now, if an incumbent who loses a very close, hotly contested election knows that a real possibility after leaving office is not that the president is going to be able to go off and do a peaceful retirement, but that the president might be criminally prosecuted by a bitter political opponent, will that not lead us into a cycle that destabilizes the function of our country as a democracy? In other words, you could never hold them accountable because then he might never leave. So we have to allow him to be a dictator so he doesn't become a dictator. Do you see how that happens?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Samuel Alito. Makes perfect sense.
Flawless logic here. Or that he could, first of all, we all know that former presidents have faced the justice system time and time again. George W. Bush famously hauled before The Hague for the crimes committed in Iraq. And
The
has been on
extrajudicial murders under the drone strike program under
Under
Obama.
Obama.
Seven countries that we hadn't declared war against, of course.
They are actually both on house arrest. We just don't talk about it. But
Henry Kissinger wasn't allowed to walk as a free man for his entire life and expire at the age of 100.
Life in jail.
He was not.
Life in jail.
He was actually. See, Max, the prison was here in his mind, and I want you. Let's never discount that.
I'm tortured in my head.
Dick Cheney shares a cell with the Oklahoma City bomber.
He does. He does. It's the same mind.
I'm writing a pilot about it.
Well, see, that's the amazing part about just this case in particular is that, and I never pretend to be somebody who can really discern what the justices are writing about, you know, and I've read so many decisions and opinions over the years, and I'm just like, I take your word for it, because I mean, the law is a complicated beast, and it's really hard to comment on. In this particular case, what I find so fascinating is that he's the only one that has ever risen to the level to have this many charges in so many different ways. It's just never, he has created the, once again, unprecedented situation that we would find ourselves in. And the only way that they can figure out to just wrap their heads around this is to say, you know what? He's going to keep pushing, right? He's like, so he's Cameron. They're Cameron and he's Ferris Bueller, and they're going to keep calling and calling. They're like, he's going to keep pushing and fuck it. Just give him immunity. Fuck it. That's how, that's where they arrived.
No, that's actually kind of an apt comparison, because that's kind of, even the liberal justices, although they've cast a lot of doubt on this one, is he disqualified? Like, can Colorado disqualify him from the ballot decision, which they said, no, they cannot. It was effectively like, well, what's the backlash going to be? Ew, I don't know. They're going to like it's out of fear that they are capitulating to, and again, once again, paving the road towards more fascism. And that's just the liberal justices. The conservative justices like Sam Alito are like fully squarely in the whatever we need to do to protect anyone like Donald Trump or anyone who comes after him, who ensures minority rule, tax breaks for the rich, like undoing the administrative state. If fucking Steve Bannon's fucking pockmark wanted to run for president, you know what I mean? Like
his facial
cyst wanted to run for president, they must defend that cyst. And
well, it's also sorry, go on.
No. Just that, like, so their article obviously is titled the last thing the Supreme Court could shock us. There'll be no more self-soothing, and effectively everyone is teeing up for the fact that they will likely, and this case is going to be delayed until June, which actually which has impacts on Jack Smith's case, because it means the Jan 6 case might hinge on this case. So it further punts that until, farther and farther down the year. Who knows if it'll make it before the election. But that it looks like they're going to give this win to Trump. You commit crimes while you're in office, you can't be held criminally liable for those crimes.
Well, they don't want to, probably, I always guess there's the sort of weird reverence for, well, this branch shouldn't be affecting or influencing this other branch, right? I'm sure there's some sort of thing sitting there that sits in the back of their mind. And I think secondly, this is the dream of Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld manifest. I mean, this idea of the unitary executive is not starting with Trump. I mean, this has been going on for, again, decades. This is the thing that blows my mind, too, is you would think that, like, history started, like, 15 years ago. Like, we just completely dismissed. I wonder if this happened in the 20th century. Like, was it, like, 1910 and everyone's just like, fuck the 19th century. We don't care. We don't know about any of it. Like, what? I don't understand it. And I would say that you see these problems will continue because it's as if we are trying to do high volume internet work and like video editing on a Windows 93 computer. Like, we are refusing. And I think we know why we're afraid to have constitutional conventions or to have real radical re-examination of our laws, of our internet broadcast. Like, what is the FCC doing about all the broadcast that happens outside of airways? There's just no regulation. And I'm not saying that regulation is necessarily a good thing, but we have no examination of what we're doing at this point. It's all just free flying. And then we refer back to these sort of systems that are really faulty and not even designed for now. So the question is, do we ever update our operating system, or do we continue to try to use 225-year-old thinking to apply to a world that has moved on and most other nations have moved on?
But what's funny about that, Anthony, is that even within our Constitution, like I'm saying, the section 4 of the 14th Amendment, or whatever, the one that says, like, hey, if you aid and abet an insurrection, you can't hold office.
Right.
Even the things that were put into our Constitution because of the way that our country developed, because of the Civil War, like, even we can't even make good on that. So we're not even utilizing what the operating system is given us.
No.
And I do want to ask Max, because I want to put this question to you, Max, and I want you to explain it to us, because I think what we've described through, again, the police state reaction to peaceful protesters, to the inability to take our money out of, weapons and war, and the just like open lobbying of Congress people for that end, to the destabilization of the Middle East, which inevitably creates blowback on us. And then we're told that Trump will be somehow worse. And then we're told that Project 2025, for example, this Heritage Foundation wish list is coming down the pike. And in some ways, my question is Project 2025 and what the right wants to do in this country, is it really all that different than what they've actually been successfully doing for decades now, that the Democrats haven't mounted any kind of defense or oppositional vision or new operating system, to put it in Tony's terms, to mount any kind of defense against?
So I see Project 2025, which is, as you said, it's the Heritage Foundation led document, but there's over 100 think tanks, agencies, organizations, and nonprofits that have signed on to it as supporting sponsors, and multiple authors that aren't just, it was coordinated by Heritage, driven by Heritage.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I see it as sort of like the Republican Party, this new Republican Party's doctoral thesis. This is the capstone research project. And I think that they are even a little bit surprised at how far they've been able to push this.
Hmm.
So, the corollary that we can draw with the Trump case, the immunity case sitting in front of the Supreme Court, is that this Supreme Court isn't acting at Trump's behest. Trump is a fool. He's a great marketer. He's all the things that we know him to be, but he himself is not a deeply read individual. This isn't somebody that really cares about where he lives in history. It's just about how much power I have at this moment.
Right.
It's the actors behind the scenes, like Leonard Leo, that they're working at the behest of. And behind Leonard Leo, there's a cadre of billionaires. The problem with talking about Project 2025, talking about the Federalist Society, talking about the Cato Institute, talking about Mercatus, or any of these other organizations that craft these policies, is that what they propose is so outlandish that you almost feel conspiratorial saying it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And they can turn it back on you and be like, what are you, nuts? That's not at all what we want. We are for freedom. We're for liberty, family values, and a strong economy that we can all, and all
Unless
of those things.
You're trans.
Right? I mean, we can all agree, right? Come on.
Right.
That's the great unifying message that didn't fucking work in the midterms. I don't understand why they keep pursuing it. Anyway, so Project 2025, we did a deep dive on it. It's 900 pages long. Wow. And I am a masochist, and so I read it because I've been studying the Heritage Foundation for a long time. The Heritage Foundation is more responsible for who we are as a nation today than probably any other organization. You've talked about a small organization that punches so far above its weight, starting with the Reagan administration, where they bragged that 60% of their policy papers actually made it into law and or executive orders. And then they all got drafted into the administration. But what's so interesting about it, and what we framed the piece that we did on it as Republicans with time. Anytime Republicans find themselves out of power, they don't just hang out and wring their hands. They get really busy, and they create these policy papers, and they say, okay, so we're out of power for this minute and a half. What are we going to do next? How are we going to reframe this issue? We see it time and time again. So we saw it when they found themselves suddenly, unexpectedly out of power with Jimmy Carter coming into office, and they were able to put themselves back together and form all of these neoliberal, anti-democratic organizations to create policy papers that guided the Reagan administration.
Right.
When Clinton came into office, nobody was more surprised than the Bush team and that entire side of the universe. And they created the Project for a New American Century, which basically created the pathway for the new military and surveillance state that we had. They had it all written out.
Right. But what timeout, because like you mentioned this in your video because and your episode, because what's funny about when Clinton came to power is that like Clinton arguably adopted all of their fucking Reaganite, like previous neoliberal policies. I mean, not totally, but like effectively, you know, like
more
you
so.
know, yeah, like welfare reform and criminal
yeah.
justice reform and all the other reforms that, you know, came
He
down
wanted to
on
put his stamp
poor
on. He
people.
wanted to convert
right.
that Bush 1 shit into Clinton stuff so that then he could claim this credit for have shifting that we're not your Jimmy Carter. We're not Jimmy Carter anymore, man. We're the new we're a new
Right.
Democrat.
Right.
The new Democrats are the closest thing to the realized vision of the original neoliberals, like the professional neoliberals, not the ones that became the Warhawks and the Cheneys that split off and were completely villainous.
Who are still neoliberals that everyone forgets they're also neolibs, but they're neocons and neolibs, and you can be the same. You can both be both.
Yeah, it's a tough marriage, but it's for them very successful. And so when I mean, the Clinton years are, we were joking about the 90s before. The 90s were awesome. Anthony, you and I are about the same age, and we had a lot of fun. We were also asleep at the switch because the new Democrats really hit, that was sort of the pinnacle of neoliberalism as we kind of cascade out of this, whatever this new era is becoming, and out of neoliberalism, which is into more oligarchy than anything else, where we are purely driven by corporate greed and the demands of the corporate class. That time in space showed the Republicans a lot. The contract for America, the contract with America under Gingrich and all of the party acolytes there, was basically the neoliberal playbook. And Clinton said, "I'll do you one better. I'll make everything tougher." And I mean, this is a man who left the campaign trail to go execute an impaired person in Arkansas on the campaign trail to demonstrate that he would be tough on crime and stand behind the death penalty. So all of those things that came into the 2000s that gave George Bush the ability to even manage the world the way he did were really founded under the Clinton administration. Project 2025 is the culmination of Republican mindset and the think tank's ideas about what can happen next. And by next, I mean, how much more can we roll back?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because
what else haven't we taken? What else haven't we, like, invasion of the body snatchered?
Yeah. Well, and how do you do it where everyone is still consuming and fixated on small things? Because that's part of it, is you can't have the society go spinning out of control. You've got to keep people consuming, spending, and working while this stuff... That's
and hating
what
each
the
other
strategy.
and blaming
that's
immigrants.
Well, that's what I assume, Max, in that reading of it, is that's a lot of it, is the way to navigate this so that everyone still sort of just sees everything somewhat the same with just inconveniences.
The grand distraction machine that you were talking about with the proliferation of social media has been to their great benefit, without a doubt, and makes it sort of a curious move. Although it's a whole separate topic we can talk about, potentially banning TikTok. But yeah, they need us distracted. They need us angry. And they need us fed just enough and making just enough money and having just enough in the bank and debt that isn't always going to crush us to keep us in this zone so they can pass all these other things. And what's interesting about 2025, and we could talk about a handful of them or just say broadly, they're all achievable. Every single line item that they have in here is achievable either through executive order or codifying it to the U.S. code or passing legislation. And the nightmare scenario that is facing progressives, Democrats, well, humans, let's just say, this is probably, you know how we always say it's the most consequential election in our lifetime?
This one's it.
This could be it. I know it sounds hyperbolic, but this could be it because what we see under Biden is not great. But the Trump plan, the 2025 plan, he will put all of this into play, and it impacts union workers, a federal abortion ban, eliminating at state agency level any talk of DEI, eliminating and criminalizing anybody that is not gender presenting from how they present, what their birth, right, what they were at birth.
It is also seems like it is rolling back, like a full rollback of the civil rights movement, like a full let's go back to when America was great, which was, before, you know, Black Americans, gay Americans had full rights. And let's extend that to immigrants, Latinos. Like, this is like the rollback feels complete, but the newness is like just how much of an oligopoly it can become, and how corporate run it can become.
Yeah, it's a war on entitlements for sure. It is a war on marginalized people for sure. There are tax provisions that they're floating, a simple and just and a fair two-tier tax system, 15 and 30%. That's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. Without, of course, recognizing that 40% of this country does not pay income taxes because they simply don't have enough money to put bread on their table. Yeah. They're going to have to pay 15% in taxes now. I mean, it goes on. And the strangest part about it is they list countries by name that they want to give the president the executive authority and the authorization to intervene and meddle into their elections and into their countries, or just to execute coups without asking for congressional oversight into anything that we do. So imagine General Soleimani's assassination, but everywhere. They're trying to codify that into law. They're so very close to doing almost everything in this document, and it will be the end chapter. So as we sit back and we hear things like, oh, this is a fight for democracy, it's a fight for a really shitty democracy at this moment.
Yes.
Versus fascism. And I think that's why we're all having an existential crisis, because we kind of understand this at a visceral level and nobody's getting it right.
I really, I appreciate, I also want to just put up Can't Ever Die's tweet that I very much enjoy, that sort of feels like it wraps this episode. They write, stop blaming President Joe Biden for not doing anything about the police violence and funding the Israeli occupation. He's just a little guy. Presidents are weak. Plus, you don't understand. If he loses, Trump will become president and have unlimited power.
He's just a little guy who lives in tiny Hamas.
He's just a little guy.
Tiny Gaza, little Gaza.
He lives in a little Gaza.
He's just tiny. He's just a little guy who lives in little Gaza.
Little Gaza, but President Trump lives in big Israel.
He shits on a golden toilet.
Yeah, but that to me also kind of encapsulates this. It's like, we have this window. Like, the election is not tomorrow. It is in 6 months. Biden's been nibbling around the edges, like, here, have this, have that. We're doing this, we're doing that. But on the big stuff, on the vision, on the, like, give us a fucking reason, he's fumbling, he's fucking up. And I do think like, we are halfway to Project 2025. Yeah. But for sure, it is a grand departure to actually enact it. And it is very scary that a lot of those things can be done by executive order. And that some of the people like Stephen Miller, who wrote chapters of Project 2025, will likely be in the cabinet. I mean, Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon are these perfect little, like they're the only two guys who actually
bros,
just like
D&D bros.
D&D bros that, like,
that's what they are.
Yeah, and they also are very honest. Like, they're the only people who are, like, honest. Like, remember when they stopped putting Stephen Miller on air because he was, like, too fashy, and they were like, whoa.
That's what I love about Bannon, is Bannon just says exactly what's going. He's not disguising it. He's saying it. And I do at least appreciate that they say it so you know where they're coming from, in the sense of appreciating how to attack it. Listen, I think that at minimum,
Naomi Klein did great work on that, because she listened to him and she was like, oh my goodness, everybody needs to really pay attention to the words that are coming out of his mouth. He means it.
And he, I mean, Bannon loves the idea that Biden is getting hammered on Israel and Gaza stuff, right? Yeah. And he also, because he knows that the left is souring on him. We saw, and I've said this before, but Anthony, to your point about Donald Trump, I mean, he's such an opportunist that he's almost running to the left of Biden in some instances on this. He had a tweet recently or whatever on Truth Social that was like, you know, Biden hates Israel. He hates Israel. But I guess he hates Palestinians more.
Yeah.
And it was like,
he's so good. Honestly,
so good
he's
at
the
it.
fucking best. He's the best.
So good at it.
Damn.
He's so good at it, and he does really call it, and it is like the saddest display to watch. Whatever cabal of morons is over in the Oval, the number of, like, pencil tied fucking guys in their 30s and 40s who are having, like, you know, Michelin star meals every night in DC and crafting their bullshit middle of the road they can't even do what Reagan did. I mean, even Reagan smacked the Israelis on the nose when they got too out of control.
Right.
And it is amazing to me that he is just, and it seems like it is a personal, private conviction of his.
Yes.
And
very
it
much.
makes
Golda
me
Meir gave him the hand job of a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so irritating to see him that this is where he's going to dig in and then kill things that I know there's no grand vision, but I'm going to tell you, 20-year-old me, whoa, you mean it's only $8 if I overdraft my account versus 35? It's only this much? That shit mattered if I was 20.
Sure.
And so what kills me is it's not like he's some grand visionary, but there's all these little chunks.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That
Yeah,
lead
there
up-
are good things.
and lead up to this idea of, even though I don't think it's actually going to happen, even if he gets elected, that they're going to create some, congressional codification of Roe, but at least that there's some attention to that. And it's just all blown away by something so reckless and stupid by the leader of a country who is a radical religious lunatic, a violent war criminal, and wants your opponent to win the election. That's
Bing,
what's
bing, bing.
crazy to me.
That loves your opponent, was the first person
Yeah.
to call your opponent to congratulate him on winning in 2016. That was Bibi Netanyahu. But anyway, we have to leave it there. I had a whole segment planned where we would make fun of Jerry Seinfeld and make fun of Colin Jost and make fun of Roseanne Barr. And we have to leave it because Anthony has a
You're going
party
to throw
to
me
get
under the
to.
bus. What the fuck? I've got to go
Anthony's
to the final
gotta
dinner.
go to a rap party. But thank you for stopping by and bitching
Thank
so
you.
Thank
breathlessly,
you.
both of you.
Max can continue to do it if you. I mean, why can't Max make fun of Colin Jost?
I would.
and I could still maybe work in a Seinfeld movie.
Anthony, where can people find you though and follow your work?
Oh God, they can follow me on Instagram, The Real Actual Tony. That's probably where I actually still post stuff. You can the Twitch, Real Actual Tony. You can watch Coffee with Tony there. You can catch me on What We Do in the Shadows this fall.
Yes.
And Monday night in New York City, I'm going to be performing live.
Hell yeah.
And it will be at the somewhere. It's called Talent Show. So look it
a
up.
talent show in New York. I love
Parkside
it.
Lounge. Parkside Lounge in Manhattan. So come check that out, and I'll be doing something fun there.
Monday, Parkside Lounge. Hope people can make it. Thank you, Anthony, for being here. Take care. And Max, where can people find you and follow your work?
All my things are on UNFTR.com. So that's where you can find the links to the YouTube show. You can find the links to the podcast. We do a newsletter that comes out weekly, and there's a lot of love and effort that goes into that. So you can subscribe to our newsletter on that as well. And I'm just really grateful to hang here and bitch with you. Big fan of you and the show and everything that you've done. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I love it's unfucking the Republic, not unfuck the Republic. Everybody listen. Also, many months back, Max and I did an episode talking about AOC, and I thought that was really a great conversation. I had a lot of fun. So maybe we'll link to that here. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and take care.
Yeah,
Come
enjoy
back.
that little human. Give my best.
Oh, yeah. Which one? No. What a show, guys. We just had to air it. Everyone's going through it. We're no different. I'm going to read some comments and then fuck off into the evening. Virginia Thomas, thank you so much for becoming a member. You get all access to all of our previous bonus bitches. Matt Gates on a white Ford Bronco, a patron and I think a member of this show, has been bitching at me that there are no more fun stories on the bonus episodes because I am just livid the whole time. And I promise you I'll bring them back. But also, if you're a patron, send me some good stories. I did have some requests to talk about Russell Brand being baptized. So you know what? Maybe we'll switch it up tomorrow. I'm going to have Max Elbaum on, but maybe I'll carve out some time after he gets off to do some fun stories. But I promise you we'll do some fun stories. Benjamin Morrill says, so much Fran and Matt today oppose the Zionist oppression. Yes, Matt has his Bad Hasbara podcast, I think now. Nita Hernandez, thank you so much, or Nader Hernandez, for becoming a member. Pondering Politics says, enjoyed your latest Piers Morgan appearance. Who else on the right would you love to spar with? Oh, God. Girl, I'm not even prepared to spar because that's not how I roll. But I realized when I was up against Tommy Lahren, I was like, I should have had a fucking joke to go about like her being mad at the Cowboy Carter album. Like, doesn't she have some Beyonce lyrics to, get angry at? Like, there's so many. I don't like sparring with right wingers. Like, it's just not, it doesn't feel productive to me. But it is kind of satisfying. And I think Charlie Kirk would be a really fun person to talk to. And because he's such a fucking idiot. And either that or one of these like female Andrew Tates, like what's that? Pearl something something. Yeah, I'd just really like to get under her skin. I think that would be fun. Christian Hansen says, can I have Fran's t-shirt in a size 2X men's? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can. And Lisa French, thank you for becoming a member. Just Julie for your super chat says FISA issues incredibly more prescient given current issues like protests and watching women's bodies. So many balls of democracy to attempt to juggle. Agreed. I mean, we already saw the way that Meta was handing over chat data based, and was able to actually convict a mother and her daughter for an abortion, right? Cray 97, my son's going to college next year. What I saw at UCLA really pissed me off. Yeah, same. And you know what? I take back everything I said about UCLA students being privileged because they have a sushi bar. You need the sushi because you gotta bear down cops. So, hey, eat all the sushi you can. Gary Cooper, a member on YouTube. How is that anti-Semitism bill anything other than a naked attempt to repress freedom of speech? I don't know. Hef, thank you for your super chat. Fran, are you coming to the Chicago area for the convention? Maybe. Should I? I am very much considering bringing a live Bitchuation Room to Chicago in August. And vamos a ver. Camperman 5000, remember when Nixon said when a president does it, it's not illegal? He actually had more morals than Trump. At least Nixon got the fuck out of office, honestly. Weren't we waiting for that to happen? And Instructor, thanks so much for gifting a membership. And Gary Cooper, the Bushes were actually to the left of Clinton and Biden when it came to Israel. And now with that, let us just ceremoniously present the fart song. I don't even know if we have. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. I also think we have someone who upped their pledge. Hang on, I'm trying to find it. I've got to go through a lot of people. I think Pedro Bonilla, did I thank you? Pedro Bonilla upped your pledge, and DM Munsinger or D Munsinger upped your pledge. Thank you so much, D Munsinger. I owe you a video. You've become part of the innermost cabal. I fucking love you, dog. And thank you everyone over on Twitch. Holy Beer Dragon said yes to lend from another channel, left his best. And Jesus Slay gave out a couple community subs. Hamma the C1G resubscribed. Thank you so much. And thank you to Paige Omek, to Maximilian Inhoff, and to Andy Vasoyan, our editor. Remember, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Remember to what else? Follow the show on all the social media platforms. Bitchuation Pod on Twitter, Bitchuation Room on TikTok and Instagram. And remember to fight the power, fuck the patriarchy, free Palestine, and don't just bitch about it, be about it. Ciao.